Okay. Oh, there's David. Okay, excellent. So now we could start. All right. Let me just share this to Facebook. Okay, hold on. Okay, beautiful. So we could get started. Let me just share the screen. Sorry. Okay, everyone can see?
Yes.
Everyone can hear?
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, so what I'll do first though is just for everyone's sake, I'll mute everyone, but you can unmute yourself if you have a question or if you want to say a comment or anything like that. Okay, so we're good to start. So welcome everyone to a new course, a very exciting new course that I'm really looking forward to teaching and to learning about. And it's actually, it's going to be, it's not going to just be one course. It's actually going to be, it starts, the first course, the beginning course is going to start with these 5 lessons, but they plan on doing this course throughout the year. Because Mashiach, this concept, this fundamental concept within Yiddishkeit, within Judaism, first of all, fundamental belief. It's one of our 12 fundamental beliefs of believing in the coming of Mashiach and awaiting his coming every day. And it's a gigantic magnus topic. There's a lot to study, to relate and to give over. So it's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of things that need clarifications, and a lot of ideas and excitement that you will fascinate you, in fact, and make you look forward to something very special, which please God, through learning this class, it will bring the process sooner. And on that, I want to say that the Rebbes, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he told Menachem Begin, he wrote once a letter to the Menachem Begin, the previous prime minister of Israel, that from a young child, he was dreaming, and he could visualize the coming of Mashiach. And that was the Rebbe undertook as his task, to bring the world into the final redemption. And in fact, in the later years of the leadership of the Rebbe, he said that our final shlichut, our final job, mission for all of us is to prepare the world to greet the coming of Mashiach. So, and part of that, the Rebbe explained, is learning about these concepts. So that's what we are doing here. And I also want to make a big clarification that the idea of Mashiach is not a Chabad idea. It's a Jewish idea, and it's something that everyone should believe, see and believe and learn and understand. And hopefully through these classes that will also come out to see how this is a accepted universal concept. It's not just a Chabad idea. And it's very much rooted in the written and the oral traditions of and Torah of Yiddishkeit and Torah. So it's interesting the way they develop this course is that they don't start off with the basics. So the basics, the more of the fundamental concepts about Mashiach, and for those that didn't yet get, I know a few of you ordered the textbooks, but it's only going to be coming next week on Amazon, which I do highly recommend that you do get the textbook so that you could utilize it after class, and you can look up the sources and all that. But not to worry, we will have the slides on the Zoom. But I just want to, in the book, it tells us that the forthcoming topics are going to deal with these more of the contemporary fundamental concepts of the definition of exile and redemptions, the purpose of exile, redemption, this centrality to Judaism, the obligation to believe. The obligation is not just to believe in its coming, but also to await and anticipate its coming. And then also the concept of resurrection of the dead and the timelines and all that. So that's going to be in further topics. And like I said, this is a course that we're going to run throughout the year. But they've decided to start off with more thought-provoking, in a way, more interesting ideas first, and that's what we're going to be starting tonight. So number one lesson tonight, which this is what we're going to be teaching tonight, is the process. Is the redemption poof, or is it a process? How's this process of the redemption going to occur? The reason also why I gave that introduction was also to know that, you know, there are going to be some advanced things going on. So if and even if you don't know yet the basics, please feel free to ask. No problem. And just ask, as well as know that it's going to be more thorough on the basics in later lessons. Okay, so I want to just share before we start a small little clip, a video to introduce this concept. Okay, so hold on one second. Let me just get back to the. One second. Okay, so that video I think was a perfect video. Get us excited about what Mashiach is, but it touched on a few different concepts in that video. But one of the concepts is the process. How's it going to come? And that's what we're going to deal with tonight as we begin to journey about learning about Mashiach. Namely, how will Mashiach come? And the first question that comes to mind is when people automatically hear this idea of Messianic era of Mashiach, what comes to mind is a fairy tale scene. Mark has his background as the yellow brick road, because that's what some people imagine or picture, like we're going to fall into a rabbit hole and everything dramatically is just going to change, and all of a sudden we're going to find ourselves in this glorious wonderland, right? So is that what's going to happen? So if you look in the sources, which we're going to go through now, generally speaking, if we're going to go through some sources, but generally speaking, you'll see that within the sources, you can basically put it into two categories. Some sources say that the process is of a more of a natural, gradual process, and therefore it's not going to be just poof and miraculous like that. And the other camp is it will be miraculous. It will be supernatural and sudden. Those are the two camps. So let's deal with the first one, the sudden miraculous approach. So the most important source for that camp is from the prophet, the Navi, Malachi. Mark, you want to read it? Text number 1, Malachi.
Behold, I send my angel, and he will clear a way before me. And suddenly, God, whom you seek, will come to his temple. And behold, the angel of the covenant, whom you desire, is coming, says God of hosts.
Okay, so there we see an important source that that basically is saying that Hashem's just going to clear the path, right, for its coming. So meaning to say that it's going to be in a supernatural way, a supernatural and a sudden way. Now the Rambam, Maimonides, which is throughout these classes is going to be quoted many times, because we know that the Rambam, first of all, in his Mishnah Torah, in his book of Halacha, he has a whole chapter in the chapter of Kings about the laws of the coming of Mashiach. So he's going to be quoted many times. But interestingly enough, the next source is not from that book of Halacha. It's from a different type of writing. The Rambam, there was a group of Jews who found themselves in Yemen, the Yemenite Jews, and still today, the Yemenite Jews that come from, that miraculously immigrated to Israel, still from back in those days from the Rambam, were being persecuted by the Arabs in those days, and they suffered a lot, and they basically were put to a stage where they had to convert to Muslim, to a different, out of Judaism religion, or be persecuted, and they wrote to the Rambam for guidance, and for inspiration, and to lead them. And the Rambam wrote them back in a famous writing called Igeret Teiman, the letter to these Teimanims. It's a fascinating writing. inspiring, helping them go through the situation. And a lot of it actually talks about different laws, what the law is when it comes to Mesirat Nefesh, of giving up your life, etc., etc. When is it allowed, when it's not allowed? And he touches upon over here. In fact, till this very day, the Yemenite Jews consider the Rambam as like their Rebbe from this period. And he writes there. So he writes there this source. All right, Ezra, you want to read it?
Sure. The Messiah will be unknown before his coming, but he will prove by means of miracles and wonders that he is the true Messiah. The mere report of his advent will strike terror into the hearts of all the kings of the earth, and their kingdoms will fall as they will be unable to make war or revolt against him. They will never defame, deny, nor question him.
Oh, sorry.
For the miracles that he will perform will frighten them into complete silence. Isaiah refers to the submission of the kings to the Messiah in the verse, "Kings shall shut their mouths, or he will be unlike anything they ever saw or heard. He will slay whom he will, none will escape or be saved, as it is written. And he shall smite the land with the rod of his mouth."
Okay, so those are just two samples indicating what? That Mashiach is going to be a sudden supernatural event. Now, let's contrast that now with other sources which indicate exactly the opposite. That Mashiach's coming will be a gradual coming, organically, naturally, no big miracles. And the first source is from the Jerusalem Talmud, and with this following story. Text number 3, Ruth. You want to read it? Rab Chia.
Sure. Rabbi Chia, Bar Abba, and Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta were walking in the valley of Arbel, and they witnessed the advent of dawn. Rabbi Chia told Rabbi Shimon, "So we will be the redemption of the Jewish people. At first, it will be a trickle, and as it continues, it will gain steam and expand. As it is stated, though I will sit in darkness, God is a light to me."
Okay, so that's source number 1 from the Talmud itself. And source number 2, indicating there will be a gradual natural process, is now from the Rambam, Maimonides. In his book of Halacha, called the Mishnah Torah, he rejects that notion that Mashiach will come with wonders, saying that Mashiach should not be by any means be the litmus test of his legitimacy, because the Rambam goes through qualifications of what Mashiach is and what a false Messiah is. And one of those is that Mashiach is not going to be the one to make miracles, etc., etc. Look at text number 4, David. You want to read it?
Yeah. One should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead, or perform other similar deeds. This is not the case. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change, or there will be innovation in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. Our sages thought there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except our emancipation from subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms.
Which is, by the way, a little similar to that video that we saw. The way the Rambam's writing it, that nothing's really going to change.
So what? The Rambam is contradicting himself.
So that's so now we have questions that we saw sources from both ways, and the Rambam itself, on one work of writings, he seems to say there will be a miraculous occurrences and it will be sudden, but in his other writings it seems to say total the opposite. So is he contradicting himself? And whom do we believe? Which source? Okay. Now, I just want to make a clarification of one thing that the Rambam writes there, because it's important to note that when the Rambam writes that that he shouldn't presume that messianic works, miracles, and wonders resurrect the dead. I don't want anyone to lead to think that Techias HaMesim is not a certainty. God forbid, because in fact, one of the 13 beliefs, which the Rambam himself penned, is that we believe in the resurrection of the dead. And that's going to be gone into more depth in later classes. So rather, the Rambam's rather over here saying that it's not necessarily going to be performed the way of miraculous natures like that we might imagine. But that will be clarified in later classes. I just wanted to make that clarification. So going back to the question is, so what do we take? Is a poof or process? The body of the sources in this question can be placed into two categories: the natural gradual camp and the supernatural sudden camp. Which one do we believe? So to answer it, I want to share another video. It's not the full answer to that, but it's a worthwhile video to watch. That gives us a little bit more indication. Okay. Again, there wasn't a direct video for this class, but I think it touches on the answer that video. And I'll tell you why. And that you'll see in the next, the key to understand this, the answer to this seemingly contradiction between these two camps is found in this Talmud. Lisa, you want to read it?
Sure. Rabbi Alexandri says, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi raises a contradiction. The verse, I, God, in its time, I will hasten it, reads in its time, indicating there is a designated time for the redemption, and it reads, I will hasten it, indicating there is no set time for the redemption. Rabbi Alexandra explains, if they merit, I will hasten the coming of the Messiah. If they do not merit, Messiah will come in its designated time.
Okay, So really, this Talmud sheds light onto an important understanding that really there's two options. The two options are either one is bi'itoi, dubbed as in its time, or the other one is achishena, which means I will hasten it. It will come pre its time. With this, we can now understand the binary concept between these two sources. In other words, if we are worthy, if the Jews are worthy, the redemption will happen sooner than planned. And when it happens sooner than planned, it will happen swiftly in a miraculous, sudden manner, as described in the first few quotes. If not, if we don't merit, Mashiach will come in its predestined time, and then it will be a gradual, natural process getting there. As we see in the words of Or HaChaim, who lived just around the time, who's a commentary on the Chumash, a Moroccan descent, very prominent commentary on Chumash. He lived in the late 1600s, just about the time before the Baal Shem Tov, and he reads, if the redemption will arrive through the merits of the Jewish people, it will be wondrous. The Redeemer will appear miraculously from the heavens. By contrast, if the Jews are unworthy and the redemption comes only because the clock ran out, it will be different. Regard in which the Talmud says the Redeemer will arrive as a pauper riding on a donkey. The prophecy that the redemption will be hastened, achishena, will occur if the Jewish people will be worthy. Regarding redemption in the Be'ita, in the set time, the verse states that a ruler will arise in Israel naturally, as do all rulers in the world. Now, it's important to explain why worthiness results in a hasty arrival and unworthiness results in a timely arrival. And it's very similar to the way the video presented, because Mashiach is not a reward, so to speak, like, okay, you did a good job, now I'll give you some chocolate chips. What it means when we say that that we are not necessarily worthy for the redemption, it means to say that, God forbid, if we're not necessarily worthy on our own right for the redemption, Mashiach will come, because there's and perhaps this will be discussed at length more in further classes, but the world was created to realize a goal, to realize a purpose. So ultimately, Mashiach will come, and that's going to be detailed more in classes, because Mashiach is the ultimate goal of creation. It is the ultimate purpose. And come what may, that goal will be realized. So if for whatever the reason the Jewish people have not yet achieved their goal on their own merit, at some point, obviously we don't know exactly when, God will take the initiative and make that happen on its own. God will make that happen, bringing around the final redemption. And the clock, by the way, is ticking already. That clock, that process started from creation. And it's a gradual process that has been going on for 6,000 years, right? That would be Mashiach's coming, bi'itoi, in its time. Zachu, when we say that the Jews merited to come, that means that they merited for it to come before the clock runs out. And therefore it will be a miraculous way. Okay, everyone with me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So now we're going to go into more depth of what the qualities of that, and to go more into detail of what the quality of Mashiach coming in a in a hastened manner, meaning if we merited in that way, what the qualities of that being. Like, what's the difference? Let Mashiach just go when the world's purpose needs to be realized, it will be realized. Why do we need to hasten its coming? What are the qualities in that? What's the advantage in that? So to explain, there are certain integral elements to Mashiach's arrival. And those elements are very much detailed in the Rambam. And like I said before, the Rambam goes through a list of what are the elements of what Mashiach to render any self-proclaimed Mashiach who lacks those qualities as being a fake. Now, in addition, there's a halachic requirements for all these, for certain things to happen in order for Mashiach to come. So, when Mashiach comes on his terms, so to speak, all those elements will be in place. Well, that's nice. One must consider that those elements are not simple events, right? Not to mention the logistics. In short, for that process to happen, it will take a long time. Just give you an example, like for all the Jews to gather, right? Or for there to be peace amongst the world, right? So those prophecies, right? It's a process. By contrast, when Mashiach comes on our terms, meaning more like the language of Achishena, when Mashiach comes hastened because we merited, then all those conditions will be unnecessary. Meaning Mashiach will instantaneously arrive and immediately put those legal steps into action. For example, by the way, those two examples that I gave before may not be good examples. This is a better example. It's commonly expected, in fact, we're going to have a whole class of it, I think, next week, that Mashiach's arrival will be announced by Elijah the prophet. However, if Mashiach arrives on our terms, if we hasten the arrival of Mashiach, according to many opinions, we don't need to wait for Elijah the prophet to announce his coming. Mashiach can come on its own. And that's similar to other conditions as well, as we see in this text 7 by Reb Chaim Halbersberg. He writes, he's a Hasidic rabbi. He writes, when the Talmud and the Midrash speak of the many changes that will occur prior to Mashiach's arrival, the context is that such events must occur only prior to a redemption that comes in the designated time. Thus, Moshe, Moses, and all subsequent sages anticipated a redemption of Achishena, so that everything can be in the best possible manner. So, in other words, they wanted to do it. They anticipated us to do it quicker, that we don't have to have those elements will happen, but they will happen in a much quicker way. Right? Now, in addition to the advantage of Mashiach's arrival being both sudden and supernatural, when we merit it, the understanding it, this will also lead us to a greater appreciation in the process of Mashiach's arrival. And what I mean by that is like this. What I mean like that is like this. We'll learn in other classes Mashiach's arrival in spiritual terms doesn't come out of nowhere. Rather, it's a culmination of a long process that's been going through our exile. The idea of that is based upon the thesis very well presented by the great Kabbalist, the Arizal. The Arizal has a whole thesis about dealing with what's called birurim, sparks. And he explains that when the world was creation, he explains the whole process of creation. And the way the world, as we know it, came about was, I'm not going to get in because this in itself is a whole class, but basically, in order for there to be a limited world coming from God, who is unlimited, there needed to be, there was what's called shviras hakelim, breaking of the vessels. In other words, initially the world couldn't withstand the power of godliness being so unlimited. In order for there to be a limited world, God had to veil, God had to hide himself, so to speak, in order for there to be a world, in order for there to be a creation, in order for the world to seem like that it exists on its own, that it exists without God, that it has independent existence. In order for that to be achieved, God had to hide, which the way the Arizal explains was that these sparks of godliness fell into the world, and they were hidden by materialism. And our job throughout exile, and the bitter exile, is basically to search for those sparks and to reveal them and to unleash them. And when we unleash those sparks, in other words, we reveal the godliness. And how do we do that? Is through learning Torah, through studying Torah, through doing mitzvahs, right? Then those sparks both return to their holy source, as well as the material matter that was hiding those sparks are sublimated. In other words, you've transformed that material matter to what it truly is, the godliness within it. In fact, that's the theory of the Arizal. Now, an important element to that theory is that the more sparks we redeem, the more material matter we supplement. In other words, the more closer the world is getting to its goal. In other words, because what's the goal? What did God create this world, which is seemingly is so far and distant from God and hides God, and we can't find God? God created because he wanted us a home. He wanted us to discover him in this lowly realm. He wanted us to make this lowly realm into a godly place. And that's and by doing so, in its completeness, is the full realization of Mashiach. That is the era. That's the goal, is bringing the world into its full realization. In other words, so when we finally release that last spark, Mashiach comes. And in fact, by the way, according to the Midrash, according to Kabbalah, when we went through the bitter exile in Egypt, the world, according to the Arizal and according to many other sources, there were 288 sparks. And again, we're talking about spiritual terms and numbers, exactly how that fits in, but there were 288 sparks that fell. And it says that through the bitter years of exile in Egypt, 208 of those sparks were revealed. And we have the rest, the work for us to do is to reveal the rest of the sparks, that all 288 sparks, Reish Mem Chet sparks, are revealed. And that's when Mashiach comes. Now, there's forces of evil, of course, that are opposed to that, because God created it in a way that we have freedom of choice, and that it should come from us, not for God to just reveal it. So there's forces within the world that want to keep that godliness hidden, and those are the forces of evil. And so they cover and conceal these sparks, and they challenge us all the time that we should look past the surface and not engage spiritually and discover the beneath it. By the way, that is, in short, the Arizal's thesis of what's called Tikkun Olam. Now, in the master plan, God never intended that the forces of evil should last forever. God set a time for that evil to run its course and expire, at which point the revelation of Mashiach will come, right? And though the work from our part may have not been done to transform all that evil and to redeem those sparks, God will just intervene, and that redemption will happen anyway, like we explained. That's what it means. That's the deeper meaning of the words. When Mashiach will come, will in its destined time. But when we are worthy, meaning to say, when we clear the negativity and we redeem the sparks more, then we hasten the process, and the spiritual climax has been reached, and we don't have to wait for the inevitable outcome. Now, the quality of us doing such a work, in other words, the quality of having the paradigm of letting it happen by us hastening it, versus the paradigm, the change that will happen when it just runs its clock, meaning God destroying what's left, is that in the paradigm that Achishena, that when we hasten it, we go down in the muck, basically. We literally deal with the evil, we get down and dirty, and we transform everything, and we get rid of the evil. We go down in the depths, as opposed to God destroying the lowest of low. And when we do that, that's a much bigger win. It's a huge win. Let's see it in the Rebbe's own words. There is indeed, and the Rebbe said this in 1970, there's indeed a paradigm about which the verse states, God sets a date for evil. Creation itself dictates that evil only has a certain time span, after which it will expire and disappear without a trace. As the verse states, and I will remove the spirit as Ruach HaTumah Avia Min Haaretz. I will remove the spirit of veil, in other words, of hiddenness, of that which conceals godliness from the world. However, this paradigm is only reserved for a situation in which the Jewish people haven't managed to make sure a reality happens within their own transformative work. Then indeed the end of days happens on its own. However, if the Jews are so worthy and transform the world, the redemption will arrive prior to its allotted time. For though the clock will not have yet run out on evil, the Jews will have managed to banish it with their transformative work. This then is the true quality. That's the real quality of the paradigm of Achishena, of when it hastens, over Be'itoi, that it transforms even the darkest of evils. Okay? So to summarize, what are two great qualities of when it happens with the paradigm of hastens and versus let it run its course, is it does away with the criteria of it doesn't that we're able to immediately get the prize, in a sense, immediately the world will transform, as opposed to it being a gradual process. And two, the whole world will be spiritually transformed. Now, in the next section, we're going to explore the possibility of us experience this redemption, and many signs that point that it's going in that direction. Okay? Everyone with me?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this binary, the Be'itoi or Achishena, the in its time or the hasten coming, is the premise that we base our entire belief of Mashiach. And with that, I mean like this. It's mentioned many times, the Rambam and others, that when we say Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema v'viat HaMashiach, that we say I believe in the coming of Mashiach, and we believe v'af al pi she'yishmameh, and even though he may weary, achake lo v'chol yom sheyavo, I await his coming every day or any day. In other words, part of that belief is, and this is going to be, by the way, elaborated in a later class, but part of that belief is believing that he can come anytime, that he can come even today. That's the Rambam says. I believe in his coming, and I wait his coming. I don't just believe I wait his coming. Meaning part of that belief that it can come any day. Now, which, if we understand that Mashiach can exclusively come, if we're going to understand that Mashiach could exclusively come only when there's a gradual, natural process, then the question is, how can we realistically believe that he's coming today? I mean, if you look around the world, right, the world doesn't look ready for what I explained earlier as the ultimate goal of the world is to transform the whole world from evil. The world doesn't seem like that, the way the world stands today. So if you believe that he can come at any time, if you look around the world, if it's a natural process of gradual, it seems like he's got a long time coming, right? So the answer is that it's possible that he could come in the blink of an eye, if we are worthy for his arrival. But on the other hand, like we said before, he can come. He doesn't need to go through the whole gradual process. He can come by us transforming it. But on the other hand, if we're going to resort to supernatural ways and sudden poof ways of Mashiach's arrival, and saying that that's the belief, it's a bit of a stretch. It's quite a stretch, because those that are more naturally rational inclined, it's easier to believe that the coming will come in a longer process. And hopefully one day we'll get there, right? That's more of a rational approach in believing, right? But to say that the world will just suddenly, poof, change its way, everyone will put down their arms, it's a stretch. So what's the balance? How do we balance between both approaches? So to unpack it a little bit more, yes, we all look forward to a miraculous arrival, that Mashiach will come and all the suffering and a host of different reasons will be over, all right? That's what we are ultimately sure, we hope for. But it's, as mentioned, although it's not incorrect to say that that can happen, like we explained, Mashiach can come in a manner of Achishena, it can come before its time. The challenge is, like I said before, that the reality that we face in the world is that it seems hardly conducive to that revelation, right? If Mashiach will walk in tomorrow morning, to today, are we ready for it? Are you ready to forgive all your material, and only focus 24/7 on godliness? Are we ready for that? So to help us see the world around us, that we are in this messianic light, the Rebbe actually pinpoints various events and upheavals that indicate that yes, Mashiach is in its imminent arrival. And the Rebbe taught us that the process of Mashiach's arrival in a paradigm where it's lo zachu be'ito, meaning in the paradigm where it's coming in its time, is already underway. That clock is already ticking. What I mean by that, this process, like I explained before, of the evil being transformed as a gradual process, that's already been ticking. That's started, right? So does that mean that we are stuck to that natural process? Or is there something to that? There's a midrash promises that there's a midrash that says that a man selling flour in the market one day can in the next moment be in Jerusalem in the temple. Are we never going to be able to see that? So not at all. We're not doomed to that gradual process. The proper way to understand it is that whatever happened, that's in the past. The process of Mashiach's coming has been underway for a long time. And we have checked off many, many boxes. That process, we've gone through a lot of it, of that process. Like I explained before, even going back to the Egyptian exile, we crossed off 208 sparks, meaning we've crossed off all those boxes. And we've been going through this gradual process for our 2,000 years in exile, etc. But at any point of that process, we can do a quantum leap. We can do a huge leap forward and bring that Achishena process, that paradigm where Mashiach comes suddenly and miraculously. In other words, a parable could be like you have a train moving, it's going. We know that there's a local train and there's an express train. So the world is on a path from day one of a local train. It's got to make all the stops for that evil to be transformed. And it's got to go through the whole process of every single stop. And we on that train. And that past, what happened has happened. But the Rebbe is saying that at any moment, you are able to skip over to the express train and skip all the parts and get, and the world could transform like that. At any moment, we can skip over. And that's what, going back to the sources, that's what Moshe was hoping for, and the sages throughout the generations. That's what they were prompting us. That's what they were trying to get us, is to get us onto the express train. And that's perhaps the Rambam, when he's writing a letter to inspire, to promote, to get everyone going in that sort of work, he describes a Mashiach that comes miraculously in the book. In other words, inspire them to get onto the express train. But when he discusses Mashiach in the halachic works, in the dry matters of the natural way of the things, he explains Mashiach as it is in its normal process, in its way of process beito, in its time, right? In other words, in the local train. That doesn't mean that we can always jump over to the express train. And in other words, that when we speak about Mashiach's process is already happening, it doesn't mean that we locked into the gradual paradigm. Rather, the process of Mashiach coming around the corner, and he does come, can always come as a wild and miraculous. So you see how now when we that belief, in other words, what until
I'm
now,
sorry, I have a question.
yeah.
When you say Mashiach is around the corner, is this based on the Be'ito Mashiach?
No. In other words, whatever happened till this point, that could be Be'ito. But at any moment, by us doing an extra mitzvah, by us starting a Mashiach class, we can jump over we can bank on Mashiach's Achishena. We can believe with absolute faith that Mashiach is coming at this moment, because we can jump over to the Achishena paradigm.
Right. So do we have any idea? I know there were dates, they were calculated by tzaddikim.
Oh, very good.
Do we have any ideas of Be'ito? Where does that?
Very good. So that's actually in the next text, in text number 9.
Okay.
Okay. We now, says the Rebbe, in an amazing talk, we now have an answer to all the chatter about our recent hype about Mashiach's imminent arrival. You know, everyone went crazy when the Rebbe made a campaign to scream out that we want Mashiach now. Everyone was saying, what do you mean? There's a whole process of this or that. What do you mean it's going to just happen now? So the Rebbe says, after all, how will such hype be received at home? What will the main street think about such talk? The answer is, if the elements of redemption were completely foreign, it would indeed be a tough sell. However, because they are not foreign at all, and in fact, much of it is already underway in our very material present-day reality, an imminent redemption will be not a surprise at all. The Rebbe is saying that in fact, hold on, he continues, in these times, and what it means that there's indications that we're heading in the express train, is because heads of states the world over have decided to reduce the weapons capacity and invest in economic peaceful measures. This is, after all, what the prophet promises, Isaiah, that they will beat their swords into plowshares, dismantling weapons and fashioning them into tools to work the ground, to produce bread. We have clear signs that the signs of the ultimate redemptions are beginning to blossom. Many great and mighty countries have reformed and established noble governments, grounded in just and fair laws. This too is a foretaste of the overall reform and peace that Mashiach will bring to the world. Another realization of this promise is the world's attitude to the Jewish people, as we have been granted religious freedom. So what are all these events that the Rebbe is speaking about? So there are many, some internally with the Jewish people and others on a global scale. And I'm going to go through them. The principal occupation of the world will be, when Mashiach comes, to know God. That's what our occupation is going to be the whole day. To understand more and more of godliness. That's what we're going to want to achieve the whole day. We're not going to look to achieve more materialism. We want to achieve more and more spirituality, and that's unlimited. That's dramatically different from the way things are today. If you look around the world's in a rat race. Everyone's running after what? More materialism, more materialism. So the Rebbe's explained that no, in fact, the world, and if you talk about times, the world has opened itself up over these past 400 years to more and more spirituality, to more and more teachings about godliness. In previous generations, chiefly the Kabbalah, right, was taught Kabbalah, the secrets of the Torah, the depths of the Torah, which is all about understanding godly consciousness, ideas about God, were only known, even within the Torah observant Jews, were only known to a select few. And then, in the 16th century, beginning with the Arizal, he started to, and he instructed his students as a mitzvah that they need to start opening these teachings to the masses, to popularize these teachings. And more so, when the Baal Shem Tov came about, he took it to even the more extreme, beginning with Chassidut, and later in generations started to decimate these teachings to more and more people, and present it in a way that's more applicable and understandable to everyone. In other words, all those developments are a sign that we're getting closer and closer to people being concerned with one objective, knowing God. Those are pinpointers to show us that the world is getting more to that process. Second point, from the moment the temple was destroyed, and again, I said the first 2 points are more with us within the Jewish community, and the other point is on a global scale. The moment the temple was destroyed, our sages placed profound boundaries on joy. For example, I'll give you one example. Prayers used to be done with musical instruments in the temple, right? Today, the Chamin said we don't do that. We don't have instruments in temples. In a sense, and in fact, that was predominantly for a very long time the work of the more pious Jews, to mourn over the temple. It was a big emphasis. People, even till today, you go into Jerusalem and in parts of the cities where you see very pious Jews, and what they do is they wake up in the middle of the night and they go to synagogue and they say tikkun, the things that we said on Tisha B'Av, right, to mourn over the destruction of the temple, that we, as everyone, do once a year. They do it every night, right? And historically speaking, that's there was a certain sense of somberness, of seriousness, and singing and dancing was more reserved for the simpletons of the Jews and the drunks. Baal Shem Tov came around and he changed all of that. And he said, joy is part of our service. Chassidus is all about simcha, right? And he made it part and parcel of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism. And he brought it back into Judaism, that it should be a focal point in our service of God. And in fact, within most recent times, you see more and more heading towards that objective, that things are no longer the way Yiddishkeit was. It's more of a, had that feeling of somberness. Happiness has become a lot more tool and focus and emphasized within, and to the point that Nachman says that if you're not serving God with joy, you're not serving God. And so, and that is another indication that we are closer in the direction of the future redemption. Because again, when it comes to the redemption, so our hearts are going to be with joy. Okay. That's with the Jewish people in particular. Global events that demonstrate that we're well on our way to a paradigm shift, and a radical paradigm shift, as the way we explained the second way of Mashiach's coming, is if you look at the global situation today, democracy and world peace is in a, as much as all the problems, we live in unprecedented times. Never before in history. Sure, okay, there are some countries that are still maybe at war, and terrible ones, but there are record numbers of democracies around the world. If you would have told your grandparents, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, that there would be such an institution called the United Nations, even though sure, as faulty as the United Nations is today, and it's not much of an organization, whatever it is, but what it stands for, right, and what it is as an institution, they would think you crazy. It would never think that there should be a United Nations of democracies. It's not. No, it's truly miraculous if you think about it. No time in history have we lived in such times of peace. The hallmark of Messianic era is global peace, as the prophet Isaiah writes, that they will be, and in fact, it's interesting that that's the phrase. If you go into New York and use in United Nations, and what's written on it is beat their that phrase, beat the swords into plowshares. That's in a sense that we see in blossoming today. And by the same token, as well as the liberties for religious way of life. And by the way, America becoming a country, and the country based upon religious beliefs, right? And free to practice religion. I mean, for 400 years that we haven't had, Jews can, and another miraculous sign is Russia. If you go to anyone who has Russian grandparents, they would want to have a Pesach Seder. Just about 30, 40 years ago, it was unheard of. They couldn't put on tefillin. They had to hide. This. You go to Russia today, it's an absolute transformation. Today, in the Kremlin, on the big red square where you would be shot and killed if you had the tefillin, they light a menorah. Right? In Berlin, where not across the street from the Nazi headquarters, they light a gigantic menorah. Right? So we're living in unprecedented times of religious liberties. In fact, I heard today that Ukraine just is making Pesach, Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah as a national holiday. It's a good thing. So we live in unprecedented times. And this is all just a taste of the incredible times that lay ahead of us. Look at text number 10. Where did it go? Is this right? Here we go. In these times, oh, I already read it. I read it. Okay. Another indicator of the imminent redemption is the historic return of the land of Israel and its influx of, and throughout now the land of Israel, being able for Jews, the immigration. I mean, 20 years ago, like 1.5 million Russian Jews came to Israel, right? And I think today, for a very long time, it was always America had a larger population of a Jewish community, and I think today Israel has the largest population of the Jewish of Jews around the world, right? And very in particular, when the Iron Curtain fell, the influx of Jews, that is again, it's not to get misconstrued. It's not the beginning of a redemption. It's definitely, however, it's definitely another step in this indication that we are not on the slow train, but we are on the express train of the coming of Mashiach. So by now, it's abundantly clear that there are two legitimate possibilities of how Mashiach can come. There's either the process of coming be'itoi, in its arrival, which is already underway, but we can hope and we can anticipate to catapult forward into a sudden and miraculous. And the reality of our times should make the belief more real in anyone's eyes, including ourselves. And we can, and I'm going to conclude with a thought from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says with a halacha, and it's actually a halacha that still exists in modern times. 2,000 years after the temple, in modern times, even 2,000 years since the temple's been destroyed, we know a Kohen were the ones that were exclusively reserved to do the service in the temple. A Kohen is not allowed to do the service inebriated, basically. He has to be completely sober. So therefore, the Kohen who was scheduled to serve for that day was not allowed to drink wine, because if he was called, if he needed to go do the service, he couldn't call. The halacha, the Rambam writes, and even till today, the halacha is that a Kohen cannot drink more than a revius, which is less than 4 ounces. Now, there might be different halachic opinions on that, but the longest amount of time, why do they say that he's allowed to drink up to revius? I mean, there's different opinions, but a lot of opinions say up to a revius. Why can he have a revius? Because the longest amount of time we assume that it takes to wean off the wine is 24 minutes. So, in the 21st century, a Kohen is not allowed to drink more than 4 ounces of wine, because we seriously consider the possibility that Mashiach can come, that the temple can be rebuilt, and he can be scurried to go into service in the Kohen, and all that can be within 24 minutes. That's the halacha still today. And that's why we're concerned about how much he drinks. So, in other words, you see how quickly things can be transformed in that way. And therefore, we should seriously consider it. And we should do what that video showed, that it may just be your one mitzvah that tips the scale of all the cumulative mitzvot that throughout the generations that we've been doing to transform the evil, and it could just be your one good deed that brings about this express train with Mashiach's coming. Amen.
Amen.
So get ready, boys and girls.
We've been ready for a long time, man.
All right. There's there's an appendix to this class, but we'll leave it at that. I think it may even be in your text.
Can I ask a question?
But you're gonna open for questions.
How come the Tzaddikim have calculated the end of the end of exile?
Right, Keitzim.
It's based on what exactly?
So we actually had a class on this in the Torah studies. Remember, guys? Remember those times where there were those Keitzim where we discussed the allocated times when Mashiach will come?
Oh, yes.
And what was the conclusion? The conclusion was that each one of these times, it doesn't mean that because Mashiach didn't come that it wasn't it means that each one of these times were an appropriate time for Mashiach's coming. In other words, maybe, and if you, in other words, these would have been good indication of times for us, for the express train to have come.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Right?
I see.
But as well as if you look at some of those times, it's interesting, one of those times that were given was during the Alter Rebbe's period, and they asked the Tzemach Tzedek that how come the time was predicted. It was 5608. And Hasidim said by the Alter Rebbe said in 5608 was a case for Mashiach's coming. And they asked the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Maharash asked the Tzemach Tzedek,
Right.
How could it be that Mashiach didn't come? And he said, a taste of Mashiach came. Likutei Torah was printed that year.
Right.
So,
Right.
so which just is an indication that even though maybe Mashiach, we didn't merit for Mashiach's actual arrival, but each of those times were big steps in the taste of that the train is hasting up a lot faster and getting us ready.
Okay, yeah. All right, anybody else questions?
Anyone else have a comment or questions?
No, thank you. It was very, very good class. Well, actually, so I've heard like there's 7,000 years between creation and Mashiach. That's the schedule.
So it speaks about that in Kabbalah, that the cycle of that the world, just like it was created in 7 days, that there's a cycle of every 1,000 years for one day.
For one day,
right? And that the world and the Mashiach, Shabbat, just like the day Shabbos is a taste of what Mashiach is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
The 7,000th year is the time when the world will be transformed in Kulol Shabbos, that the whole world will be transformed into that era, right? That we were discussing.
Right.
But that means, by the way, that we are ready, it says on Friday, on Erev Shabbos, can start tasting the food of Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to taste the food, which means that in the 6,000th year, right? And by the way, the world, when we say now we're going into, what are we going into?
81.
81. So which means we are already in the 6,000th year, right?
Yeah.
Because it starts from 0, right?
Right.
So we are already in the 6,000 years. So we are already on Erev Shabbos. But we don't need to wait another 400 years for Mashiach to come.
Right, but that's the set time. But we can hurry that time.
Correct. That's what we are learning tonight. That we're not regulated to the process of bi'itoi.
Very good. Thank you.
You know, another indication, and as well as what we're seeing, is the debates that are going on today. Even though they are very much not in the language terms of good and evil, but they are using other terms, but they very much step into line of good and evil. And the world has become very binary of either you step into the line of good or you step into the line of out. There's no in between, like there used to be.
But who
And
created evil?
that's a separate discussion, but I'm talking about the discussion of good in the terms that I was talking about in the class of the good
Right.
and the evil. And very much that's what you're seeing today with even the topic, even completely unaware of. I'm talking about within politics. I'm talking about within ideas of racial tension or this and that. And again, substitute concepts and substitute wording. But people are no longer comfortable with just living in the sense of like they used to be, with just carrying on with things like with being content with, okay, it's not 100% great, it's a little bit great, it's not 100%. People want today, it's either 100% this or you zero, right? And of course, everyone is arguing what exactly that is, and everyone has their different opinions or this or that. That's what I mean. But if you think about the paradigm shifts that we are seeing within the world, again, these shifts don't just come from us. It's the global transformation happening all the time. We again see more of an indication the world is stepping in that direction.
Another question, the temple. I've heard two different interpretations of how the temple will be rebuilt. Is that it will be built by Mashiach, or that it will be sent down from heaven?
Okay, so the first two temples were man-made.
Right.
And the third temple will be sent down from heaven.
Okay, so that, because
that will never be destroyed, that will be eternal. And that's why it's created by God, because anything created by God is eternal. Whereas if it's created by humans, it's limited.
So then the humans that are like trying to go up, and I don't remember who it was, he tries to keep, every year I think he goes up and tries to lay a cornerstone for the
no, now you're going into separate
yeah.
Whether you can go on the Temple Mount or not, that's something.
But it doesn't say that we're going to just put the door as the finishing touch of the temple.
Maybe. I don't know.
I think I heard that, I'm not sure. But this global transformation you were talking about, this has come through the service of God of the Jews.
Of everyone. Everyone has avodah. The avodas abirurim. It's the Jews doing their mission of task. And the Rebbe, by the way, was also another indication. The Rebbe said that it's not just on the Jew. It's for this transformation to happen. It's not just upon Jewish people. The Rebbe says that it's very much in line that the Mashiach is a global transformation. So the Rebbe said that we are in days where. And by the way, the Jews were the ones that were meant to be Or L'Goyim, the light upon the nations. In other words, to transmit these teachings of the Torah, that the nations of the world should keep the 7 Noahide laws, because we all, right? And the Rebbe said that we are in unprecedented times, that never before in history the Jewish people have that opportunity to teach these 7 Noahide laws, which before in history we never had, because before in history primarily most times in history Jews lived either under persecution, or they lived in very limited how much the authority could they have an impression on. But today we live in times where Jews can teach without that worry at all. So again, the Rebbe saw that as again another indication where we are living in times where the indication that the world is ripe and opportunity for us to switch over to the express train.
Amen. Ishkaya.
Okay, so
Okay.
thank you all for joining, and please God, next week, Thursday night, the class, there's going to be the next week is going to be a very off-the-wall topic, but there's the topic is about Gog and Magog, that there's a midrash that we're going to see, go into depth of it, that there's going to be very turbulent, terrible wars, and that have to happen before Mashiach comes. So we're going to discuss that. So that's next week's discussion.
Okay.
All right. Have a wonderful night, everyone. And
right. Thank you, Rabbi. You as well.
Thank you.
Very well.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night.